Hi, everybody. This is Brad Daw. I'm here with Mayor Dave Young. I have to say, I met Dave many years ago before he even thought about running for mayor. And my first real impression of him is he's very, very much a family man. His big issue had to do with things with his son. He was very concerned about what was going on, and he could see that what was happening really required a change to state law, but it all stemmed from the fact that he's a father who cared about his kid. He's been a strong member of the community for years. His wife, Kathy, has been very involved in politics, and that's kind of how I met Dave. And in the past 4 years, he's been mayor of Orem, and he's done some great things that we're going to talk about here this evening. But anyway, that's a short intro. Mayor, we're glad to have you on the program. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And of course, our first question right out the gate is, having been in office and where I've been in office, some people say, what in the world makes you want to run? I know years ago you said you'd never run or you weren't thinking about it. And here you are, you've been mayor for 4 years and you're teeing up again. What brings you back and what makes you want to run again for another term?
That's a great question. Originally, I only planned on running for one term, and I didn't even plan on running for one term. I essentially decided the last week, the last hour, to go sign up. And I was just encouraged by other people to do it because Orem was on a path where we knew they were going to, they'd been bringing in a lot of high density. The previous 10 years, they'd brought in about 3,800 units of high density. And the plan was to bring in 10,000 more. And when I heard that, I was sick about the 3,800 because I felt like it was changing our whole dynamic of our community. But to bring in 10,000 more, I felt would have decimated it. But they wanted to bring in 10,000 apartments. They wanted to put this BRT bus down State Street.
Now, I got to say, on this program, we say EBRT, Empty Bus Rapid Transit. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Right. And I hadn't heard that before, but that's appropriate. There is one time of the year when it is full. It's the BYU football games.
Yeah, tomorrow night it'll be full, and go Cougars.
Right. But anyway, there was a vision. What was happening was you had your city management who was running the city, and your mayor and your council were, for the most part, told what to do. And that wasn't, there was no real representation. And so myself and a lot of citizens got really frustrated that our city kept being changed for what we deemed for the worse, and we had no say in it. But we kept being promised by the different politicians who were running that they were going to like stop the density and stop all the madness, but they didn't. So anyway, that's why I ran the first time. I've got a list of significant accomplishments over here. There's about 33 different huge items that we've changed in the city in the last 4 years. When you ask why am I running again, well, like I said, I didn't plan on it, but a few months before the time to register to run, I learned that these same forces were at work again. The same folks who had brought us all the high density in the past were in the wings pushing candidates to bring that all back. And so I felt like, all this hard work that we had done and all the success that we had had for the residents of Orem, and then we had a group who was trying to take us back to the past and a lot of the failed policies of the past. And so anyway, to keep us on the trajectory that we were on already, I decided to run one more time. But this time I'm stipulating this is definitely the last time, so somebody else is going to have to step up next time.
Excellent. Now, you talk a lot about the impetus, sort of the central point is high-density housing. And I have my opinion on why it's bad. I think it's very anti-family, but what are your concerns? I've heard some city council candidates talk about, well, we need a place for our kids, and we need affordable housing, and there's a whole litany of reasons. Why do you oppose high-density housing in Orem?
Well, because I feel like Orem has done their part already. When I ran, Orem was about 42% rentals. So it's 42% rentals with the slug of that being high density. If you look at the way they classify the cities, and I need to go back and look at that, but I know we are one of the densest cities in the state in terms of just property and population and all the rest. And so you're not going to take one of the densest cities in the state and just keep cramming high density into it. Somebody described it to me as, if you've got a 5-gallon bucket, why are you going to try and put 10 gallons of water into it? It's just not going to work. And that's kind of where we're at with this whole density issue. Is we've got too much, and we've done our share. And for people who say, well, I want my kids and grandkids to live here, well, we've got plenty of density for kids and grandkids to live if they can find it. The big lie about high density is that it's an affordable option, because it's not. Because a lot of the apartments, I'm not going to name names around here, but for 2 and 3 bedrooms, you're paying $1,500 to $2,300 a month, and that's not affordable. It's a myth.
That's often the rent on a small single-family dwelling.
Right.
Well, you know, the fact is, I've lived in Orem over 30 years. I've had a nice house on 8th East. It's a modest house. We have a ward that's all houses. It's a great neighborhood. It's a fantastic place. I've raised my kids there. They've loved it. I want that for my kids. Now, maybe that's Orem, maybe it's not. But it feels like in high density, you lose a lot of that character. Has that been your observation?
You absolutely do. It changes the whole dynamic of the city if you go more and more density. Your big cities. I mean, if we want to be downtown Salt Lake, and have that kind of an environment and call it Orem, then great. But I think we need to proactively decide if that's what we want or not. And everyone I talk to doesn't seem to want that. And the other thing that people complain a lot about is traffic. Well, density just means more traffic. So there's not this scenario where you can just keep building density without completely changing the nature of what Orem is. And it's kind of crazy, because people always like to love their community. And then it grows to a point to where if it keeps growing, it's no longer the way their community's always been. And so it changes in a way that makes it so much less desirable. So I'm trying to draw a line in the sand and say, we want Orem to remain Orem, so that we can continue to have the kinds of experiences that I had raising my family and raising my 5 kids.
Excellent. Well, let's move on a little bit here. We've had a pretty tragic event here a couple weeks ago, and I think it bears discussing a little bit. We had a nationally prominent figure on the conservative side at UVU campus, Charlie Kirk, and we don't need to go into details, but clearly that shooting has affected all of us. And as mayor, you probably heard about that quite a bit and got asked quite a bit about that. What's your reaction to that shooting?
Yeah, no, from the moment I knew the moment it happened, my phone was blowing up. Within moments, we had our emergency operations center over at the city going full tilt with our police and fire, and we were just gathering information. But anyway, that was, that is the single most horrific thing that's ever happened in our city, right? And with that in mind, Orem is not known internationally, but now it is, unfortunately. And so I had international media reaching out from me, from Australia, from England, from Europe, from all across our country, just wanting to know what is Orem, who is Orem, how's this happen? And I would explain to people that this is shocking to us, because this is not who we are. It's rare that you ever hear about a murder in Orem, let alone an assassination of a political figure like this. And anyway, it was. And so the point I would make to these people was just, this is not who we are. This is completely foreign to our nature. And Orem's a religious community. It's a kind community. It's got 23 parks. It's got all kinds of amazing things, amazing people. And it's just sad that this happened here.
It really is sad. And speaking of who we are, there's been what I would call an illegal. And not what I would call it is illegal. There was a push-pull sent out recently, and it was done illegally because, frankly, I passed the law, so I know it was illegal. Polls by law in Utah have to indicate who paid for the poll, and this one wasn't. And this was a push-pull because it would ask leading questions trying to get you to, in other words, not trying to get your opinion, but trying to pressure it a certain way. And one of the questions on there, which I won't give you word for word, had to do with a lawsuit against you or your son down in Alabama. The poll made it sound pretty bad, but I'm assuming there's another side to that story.
Yeah, there's very much another side of that story. That's my opponent's favorite topic. It has nothing to do with Orem. It has nothing to do with all the amazing things that we've done in the last 4 years, but it's just dirty politics, right? And the essence of it is, in the short version, there's a long version, but the short version is my son had a friend in Alabama. My son was running a home flipping company that I was funding back there. That home flipping company flipped 60 homes over 4 years. So it was very active, very profitable company. He had a neighbor who was a friend of his, and it was an older guy. The older guy came to him and asked him if he would let him invest in flipping some homes outside of my company, which was called Torch 13. And so my son and him made a private deal, which was the guy would give him $200,000. He would take that $200,000 and start investing it in flipping homes, just as a side deal that had nothing to do with me. I did not even know this loan existed. Mm-hmm. And my company had nothing to do with it. So anyway, long story made short, my son paid back about $60,000 on the loan, so he owed $140,000.
Oh, plus some interest, I assume.
Yeah, plus some interest.
Yeah.
But there was $140,000 on the principal that was left. And so I get a call from this friend of his. Well, fast forward. So my son goes through a nasty divorce, and is going through the divorce. He stops making the payments to the guy. Again, I didn't know the loan existed. And so in the process of making these payments, they stop. And so then the guy reaches out to me, and I'd met the guy one time in Alabama when I went back there, but he reaches out to me and he says, hey, your son's not paying this loan back. Would you be willing to pay it for him? And I said, I barely know you, and I didn't know anything about this loan you had with my son. If you would have asked me, I would have told you not to do a loan outside. Anyway, and so I just said no. And so next thing I know, I got served a lawsuit, and the lawsuit was against my son, and it was against my company, Torch 13, and it was against me. So I called up an attorney. The attorney said, this is a completely frivolous lawsuit. We see this all the time. People just throw these out to try and get money from wherever they can. And so I said, okay, fine, deal with it. And then he wound up trying to get it dismissed. It turned into a trial situation. So I had to go back to this trial in Alabama. It was a 2-day thing, a day and a half. And it was in front of a judge. Anyway, again, long story made short, I went back there. It was about as kangaroo court as you can get. The judge seemed to care more about whether or not you were vaccinated than what the law was. I mean, that was an issue he made in the court. And so we go through this whole thing. I can tell this is not legit. I'm being ramrodded through this thing. It's just being made up as far as I could tell. And on the second day, I realized that there was no recording happening. I thought this person who was the transcriber or whatever, sitting out the side, I thought they were doing the transcript. Well, they weren't there the second day. And so I asked my attorney, I said, who's doing the transcript? He said, oh, nobody. And then I found out that there was no transcript of this trial, right? And if you don't, what was going through my head, if you don't have a transcript, now the judge can do whatever he wants, because there's no way to appeal. There's no second look at this. This is just a cute little thing that they do in the South sometimes. That they don't do this in Utah. I mean, every single thing is either recorded or transcribed on the legal side. Almost every other state's the same. Anyway, so there's no transcript, so that made me really nervous. And then as we get to the end, the judge decrees that he was going to find my son owing the guy this $140,000. But then he put the $140,000 onto my company that had nothing to do with it, Torch 13, and then he put this $140,000 onto me that had nothing to do with it, which was even more bizarre. And that would have been, one thing, but with the no transcript program, he then takes the $140,000 and he does. And I'm a math guy, so I understand how numbers work. But somehow he magically takes $140,000 to $350,000, and at that point I'm going, are you kidding me? Oh, but then he does double punitive damages. There's really no such thing as punitive damages on a loan. Mm-hmm. it's for all kinds of other legal things. He does double punitive damages, so he goes from $350,000 to $1 million. So now all of a sudden, my son, the company, and myself owe $1 million for this $140,000 loan, and we can't. And I actually did try to appeal it because my attorney said it was so outrageous that I should, even though there's no transcript. But after a year of messing around with this, the appeals court came back and said, no, you can't really. There's nothing we can do because there's no record. So, and I think that goes to, I think it's a South thing, not to be categorizing, but I think back in the day, if you wanted to just like pull somebody off the street, throw them in court, do whatever you wanted to them, if you don't have a transcript, you can, because they have no way to fight back. So anyway,
I can tell you, the legislature in Utah would not put up with that for 1 second. We have court recorders. That's so outside the bounds of good law. I cannot believe that. And you're on the hook for having done exactly nothing wrong.
Yeah, no, I was, and the only recompense I got out of Alabama was afterwards. I did file a malpractice lawsuit against my attorney, because I can't say things on this podcast about what I think was going on, but I filed a malpractice lawsuit, and then I won. And so it's a confidential settlement that I'm not allowed to say the amount.
Sure.
But it was a very good settlement that helped ease the pain of this whole mess.
Well, the fact is, and not delving into too hard, but I would imagine that malpractice lawsuits against attorneys are rare, and you better have your ducks in a row if you're going to file. And the fact that you won really says quite a bit about the quality of the case.
Right. The fact that I won in Alabama as an out-of-state person,
right,
says a whole lot about the case.
With an attorney that's licensed in Alabama.
Right.
So basically you came in and beat the hometown team.
Right.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that explanation. One of the things that happened early in your administration, I understand Terry Peterson, as a member of the council, kind of drove this, but obviously you supported it, and that is that we had a move to allow Orem to become its own school district. Now that Prop 2 a couple years back did not pass, but it did a couple things. First of all, it created this group called Stronger Together, who are now running their own candidates and who seem to think that the reason we shouldn't vote for you, at least in part, is because you put that on the ballot, and how dare you let the voters decide on something.
Right.
And, secondly, it's evolved into other things too. But walk me through that whole process of deciding to put that on the ballot, let voters vote on it. And of course, we know the outcome. Alpine is now over, and there's 3 new school districts. So when other people in the district decided to vote on it, they voted overwhelmingly to split the district up. But anyway, I'm stepping on your lines. Tell me your process going through that and how that ended up on the ballot.
Yeah, well, that, as far as where that came from, when I ran, the school district wasn't anything I was campaigning on. I never even brought it up. It wasn't really a priority. Now, I had known about the school district for years, different people talking about, it should split and all the rest, but I didn't have that much of an opinion on it, to be honest. And so we had our first city council retreat after I was elected, and Terry Peterson, Dave Spencer, I can't remember who exactly, but somebody brought it up that, hey, we should do a study and just see what the numbers are as far as if what Orem is putting into Alpine School District they're getting back. And so to me, that was a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we do a study? Why wouldn't we look at where we're at? Why wouldn't we look at if our taxpayers are being treated fairly? And so let's just do a study. And so for me, it was, whatever. So, and the vote was 7-0 on the council. Everyone agreed to it. And so from there, then we had to find somebody to do the study. That wasn't exactly easy, because as we started looking at some of the main firms around, we talked to them, they didn't want to do it. And the reason they didn't want to do it was because they knew the political nature of it. And they had clients who were school districts, and there's all this interwoven people, each other's friends and all the rest. And so most of them wouldn't do it. And we did find a firm that was interested in doing it, and it was because they were a newer firm, and they actually had an interest, and with that firm they had a guy who had a lot of extensive school district experience, and then another guy who was, if I remember right, he was the main CFO for the Larry Miller Group. So he had a lot of numbers experience, right? So anyway, we brought that up. We went to hire them. Became this group called Stronger Together, and they didn't want anything to. They didn't even want a conversation about whether or not the district would split. I mean, they were completely against it. So when we introduced this group that we hired, they all came and complained and said there was something wrong with them when there wasn't. They're a very, credible group. So they did the study. The numbers came back, and it showed that over the previous 20 years, about somewhere between $180 and $200 million had gone out of Orem for which we had got no benefit.
And that's property tax money for
That's
the most
property
part.
tax money.
That's what we pay to school districts is property tax.
Yep, that was a property tax money that had just gone out. So we had this big deficit of where that was going, and so I saw that as a problem. That didn't make sense to me, especially if you try to make the argument that, oh no, it's okay because you need to help the other areas. That's an argument, but not why your schools aren't being taken care of, why your schools are not seismic proof, and why your schools are being shut down by Alpine School District. So you've got this big deficit going out while you're being neglected, basically. And then I started to get wind that, a little bit later, that Alpine was going to pass a bond, and they were going to try and pass a bond, it's $595 million bond. And of that bond, we learned that the plan was for Orem to get 2 gyms, and their value was like $10 million each or something.
And just to interject there, how many seismically unsound schools are there in Orem? There's quite a few, as I understand.
Yeah.
There's at least 5.
Right. I can't give it a number. I just know there's more than there should be.
Yeah. So 2 gyms is barely a sop.
Yeah. No, 2 gyms. If you value that at $20 million, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say 2 gyms cost $30 million, which they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But let's pretend $30 million on a $600 million bond, and then that bond, Orem would be responsible for about $130 million of that bond. So our taxpayers would be paying $130 million and give back 30. And so to me, when I saw that, when I just saw the numbers, I thought, this is insanity. Why would we go along with this? And so then we decided, why don't we let the residents know the results of this study and let them decide what they want to do. It seems rational to me. So that's why we have a voting process. Mm-hmm. And then also, we had to do it as Orem only, just because of the way the laws were written and the way it all worked. But
and sorry about that. I was in the legislature when that was voted on. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so we had to do it as Orem only. But I had talked to the legislators, the mayor, not the city council, but the mayors over Vineyard and Linden, and both of them said if we were able to pass it, their cities would join in. Mm-hmm. So there was a plan for Orem to make it happen, and then for the other 2 cities that came in. Now the opposition put out that was not the case. Well, that was another of the dozens of untruths.
That's a nice word for lie.
Right. So anyway, that was the essence of it. Was essentially I put it out there. I'll always say that this whole school district thing proves I am not a politician, because no politician would ever go down the path that I went just to try and get the truth out.
I hear you and I understand. I also understand the Utah Taxpayers Association weighed in on that particular study and said that it was valid, and in fact that Orem could pull off being its own school district by itself without having to raise taxes.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, Orem is the most solid, of the cities down here. I mean, Linden's solid too, but as far as Orem could have totally done it by themselves if they wanted to.
And that brings me to my next point. I mean, obviously, if you got the Utah Taxpayers Association saying something's okay, they have a very solid reputation. But what's your thought on taxes in general? I mean, as mayor, you guys have the ability to raise property taxes and other things like that. How do you approach those kinds of things?
So it's interesting, and I can see how things kind of work now that I'm in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
Your city always needs different things. And so for a lot of people, I mean, the mayor, the city council, the executive staff, we'll have conversations about, should we raise taxes for this? Should we raise taxes for that? And my overriding opinion is that we do everything we can to not raise taxes. We only raise taxes if we absolutely have to. And that means that we can make things more effective. We can change processes. We can rearrange personnel. There's a lot of things we can do without raising taxes. And to that point, if you go back in the last 4 years that I've been mayor, so with that process, so Utah counties raised their taxes 47%. That's a big number. Alpine School District has raised their taxes close to 40% during this time. We've just gone through one of the highest inflationary periods in the last 40 years under Joe Biden, right? And so everything is kind of pushing up. Well, Orem has not raised their taxes once during this entire time. We've been able to rearrange things and be more effective. There's an example of this would be the Chamber of Commerce. So they have an award that's called the Business of the Month. And they gave us the Business of the Month award to Orem City.
As a city?
As a city.
Wow.
And they said, we're the first government entity they've ever given this award to, because they said we are actually run like a real business. So, and if you do that, then you can keep taxes low, because businesses don't have the option to raise taxes.
Now, clearly along those lines, there are some things that are worth paying for. I mean, everybody wants safety. Everybody wants a good police force, fire department, safe roads. And it looks by outside in that you were able to maintain that, again, without raising taxes. How did you pull that off?
Yeah, like I say, you just have to, you have to manage it to that. And I'm not saying we'll never raise taxes, because it just depends on all the variables. I mean, you still have to run it the right way. I mean, if you have some issues with police or fire, these different things, you have to run it the best you can. But it's raising taxes is just the easy way out, right? And as far as our police, our fire department is, I mean, when I got in, I challenged each of our departments to be the best in the state. And our fire department has definitely risen to that challenge. And by a number of metrics, they are the best fire department in the state. So, and that's not because we're raising taxes. That's because we're doing all kinds of other things to help them become the best fire department in the state.
Excellent. All right, you talked about taxes, and one of the things that kind of plays into that, and I will say this up front, I have a love relationship with Utopia. When the idea was first introduced over 20 years ago, I thought, well, Spanish Fort did it. They did a good job. Maybe it's okay. And then after it got enacted, and I was in the legislature at the time, and we saw the interlocal agreement, I'm saying to myself, who voted for this? I mean, because this is, I mean, it was literally sticking your foot into a bear trap and putting taxpayers on the hook for something they could not readily get out of. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as a legislature, I called for an audit. Now, that being said, I have Utopia now, and it seems to be kind of behaving itself. But there's got to be a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. Anyway, you came in after the fact. What has Utopia meant to your administration, and where do you sit on that whole idea of, should we have done it? Could we have done it better? What should we do different? Give us some ideas there.
Okay. Yeah, no, Utopia, I mean, it's an interesting name, right? Utopia, it's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, but a lot of times in politics, the name doesn't match the actual item. No, I remember a lot about Utopia, because going back in the day, I was one of those residents who, when I saw this coming into the city, I thought it was pretty outrageous. I mean, I'm all about technology, fiber, internet. I think that's all great. Where it goes sideways, though, is when you have a public-private partnership, which is what this was. So I know the folks who are running at Utopia now, because I've dealt with them on had different meetings and that sort of thing. I think they're doing a good job now, considering the hand that they were dealt, which is a very bad hand. But going back to, was it a good decision in the first place? No, it was one of Orem's all-time worst decisions. Essentially, they invested, Orem and other cities invested close to $200 million. And within a few years, that $200 million was worth $50 million. So a 75% loss. So that's how it started out. But the mess is that, so you create this giant mess, lose all this money, and guess who's on the hook? Orem taxpayers. right? And there was no way out. At the very beginning, when they signed up these different agreements, they were effectively on the hook for, in total, $116 million. And so anyway, fast forward to now, to your question. So where are we at right now? So in 2025, every year, like the last several years I've been in, we've written out a check for $2.5 million net to Utopia.
And that's right out of taxpayer funds.
That's right out of taxpayer funds. That's right out of your general fund. That's money that we have to pay for this service. And so if you add it all up, essentially, like we talked about the school district and, $200 million over 20 years that's just gone out and vaporized. Let's look at Utopia. Well, Utopia, Orm's paid out right at $52 million, and they've been paid back $4 million from Utopia. So it's a net $48 million that we're negative on this. And so what did we get for the $48 million? Well, essentially 40% of the city is using Utopia, and that's the highest it's been through the entire time. That's actually a big success story that 40% use it. But what that also means is 60% who are paying taxes don't get any benefit from it. And that's all piled towards this $48 million that's been spent. The other real issue, because I remember a conversation where somebody saying this is great because we had it during COVID. Well, that's a silly argument, because to think that we're the only city in the country that had internet during Utopia, I mean, everyone has internet. It's just you get it different ways. If you go the free market path, you don't sit here with a $50 million negative deficit to get your internet. You just skip the deficit part and you get your internet and you pay for it. So it's just a fallacy of public-private partnerships.
Right. And I understand Utopia isn't even available across the whole city. Is that right?
I'm not positive where we're at on that. I've heard that too, and I know that for years I know that was true. I'm not sure if they've closed that gap or not.
Okay, but it sure took them an awful long time. I know it took a long time to get to my neighborhood, and I was glad when it did, but boy, I was frustrated how long it took and how long I was on the hook as a taxpayer for a service I couldn't even access.
Right. Now you're paying for it for 20 years and you can't even get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Well, I want to talk about another issue about management, and this isn't exactly public-private, but it's more state and federal, or city and federal, and that's the.
Can I just say one thing?
Oh, please.
So, just to bring this full circle, I've given my views on this, but my opponent in this election, she was a big champion of Utopia.
Yeah.
She voted for Utopia and everything we're talking about it. Also, we talked about taxes. She proposed a 50% tax increase when she was in. That would have been that's the largest proposed tax increase on record for the last 50 years.
Now, wasn't that voted on and then the voters referred that and got it shut down? Is that the tax increase you're talking about?
That's the one. If you go back to the records, she voted for a 50% tax increase. The city council itself voted against it, even though she was a big proponent of it.
Yeah.
They came back and they voted for a 25% tax increase.
Right.
She voted against that because
it wasn't big enough.
It wasn't the 50%, I guess. But she voted against that, and then so the city council approved it, tried to jam it through, and then it got a referendum to the voters, and the voters shut it down. So, so that's a good example of taxes. That tax increase that could have been 50% never ever passed. But here we are today, all these years later, and somehow Orem survived without that tax increase.
Somehow. And we're doing well.
Right, we're prospering.
There you go. All right, well, I appreciate you bringing that up. That was obviously very helpful. So let's get back to, we've mentioned the EBRT before and traffic management in general. Obviously, one of the things that cities have to do is make sure we have good roads. Which some cities do better than others. But I can say that it's been a long time since I've hit a pothole in Orem. What's your approach on traffic management, and how do you feel about I kind of made my opinion known about the BRT, the EBRT, but give us some ideas on what you've been able to do there and what you'd like to see going forward.
Yeah, so the BRT is, they actually, it had such a bad reputation they changed the name to UVX, right?
Oh, that's right.
So they rebranded it. It's kind of like the post office. They used to have an issue with people being upset standing in lines, and so they just took out all the clocks.
Oh,
You know, so this is the whole idea. If it doesn't work, you change the way it looks.
So they'll tint the window so you can't see that the buses are empty. They haven't done that yet, but it's coming, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. I'm not even going to say. Yeah. But yeah, as far as BRT, UVX now, the plan was to bring that down State Street, and that was actually a big issue in the last election with my opponent. He wanted to bring it down State Street. I was completely against it. And that turned out to be a really good decision to be against it. It doesn't make any sense in the first place to essentially create more congestion, take out 2 lanes on an already finite amount of space on State Street, you know, mess those businesses up for 2 or 3 years. That whole thing doesn't make any sense, but now it even makes less sense because the legislature, I don't know if you know this, but once they got the BRT going down the different paths they sent it, they added a law called station area plans. And with the station area plans, they deemed that at every bus stop on this thing, for a quarter mile around that bus stop, a quarter mile circle, you have to have high density. So it's like a Trojan horse that brings density into your city, and that was the end game with BRT.
I call it a virus, but you know, Trojan horse works too.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to find out who proposed that bill and who voted for it. That sounds like an exceptionally bad idea.
Yeah, and they did the same thing with tracks, except
Yeah.
for tracks is a half a mile around at every stop.
Gosh. Well, you know, we talked about congestion on State Street, and that reminds me, on State Street we have this lovely edifice called Midtown Village, which is beautifully located amongst about 3 auto parts stores, and across and on a very busy street. From my outside view, it looks like it's been an enormous boondoggle. What's been your experience dealing with it, the aftermath of it, and how did we get to have that thing in the first place?
Yeah, that as far as Midtown Village, that was Karen McCandless' time. She was on the city council when they approved that, and they not only approved it, they did a mini public-private partnership with it, in that they voted to approve the parking garage, and essentially have they did a deal where the city could be on the hook for up to $7 million for the financing the parking garage. Ultimately, when they took the loan out, it wound up being $4 million. But the bottom line was the city was on the hook for the parking garage. And then it just, I mean, in my opinion, it doesn't fit in. It's just off of our neighborhood, and it's called the Great and Spacious Building, is what people reference it as. It's 7 stories, and I mean, I think it's functioning fine now, just to be nice and, you know, be a good neighbor. But was it a good decision in the beginning? No, it made no sense from a zoning perspective. And then I don't know how many times, I think it changed hands at least 4 times. I know it went bankrupt, and it sat empty for, I've heard anywhere from 7 to 10 years. I'm not sure what the number is, but it was a long time.
Sat empty was a big eyesore right there on State Street for everybody to see for a long time.
Right. And it's been used as an example of poor decisions by Orem City in the past.
Well, I think that goes to it right there. And clearly, if something like that came up in the future, you'd say, you guys want it, you're going to pay for it, and it's going to make sense zoning-wise.
Yeah, no, we actually, I mean, we push back all the time. And that's the difficult thing with your mayor and city council. If they're just decorative, they pretty much go along. Every developer that shows up, they just say yes. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got, 4,000 rentals in the previous 10 years before I was elected, was they just kept going along with things. And the way it should work is you should have a mayor and city council that are trying to protect the community and its values and just its feel, just what it is. You've got a mayor and city council that are protecting that. And then you've got developers that come in that want to do different things, especially when it comes to residential. And they want to push, their agenda. And it's a free market, it's capitalism, that's great. But if your mayor and city council just lay down, then the developers will put in the most density they possibly can. For example, up on Canyon Park, I don't know if you saw that, where those buildings came down. Mm-hmm. Did you see that over there?
I haven't, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so they have the Canyon Park. Used to be the old Word Perfect.
Yeah.
Now it's called Canyon Park.
Yeah, I worked there for a few times.
Okay, so they decided to take down I believe it's 4 buildings, 3 or 4, and they wanted to put, residential in there. Well, the first off the books conversation we had was we were told that they need to put 350 units in there, and we came back and said that's a no-go, that's a non-starter. And so then they came back and said, well, we want to put 250 units in there. And we said, no, that's a no-go. And at that point in time, they said, well, it doesn't pencil. It won't work. We're not going to be able to develop this. We'll have to walk away. And so we said no. And so then it came back a third time, and it was 128 units, if I remember right. And once again, that time, the council was pretty split. It looked like the developers were going to get their way. But a bunch of residents came out, and they basically backed up those of us who were trying to stop it, and we were able to stop that. And so they came back, and again, it won't pencil. So then they come the fourth time, and I think the fourth time was like around 78 units or something. Well, that actually makes sense on 24 acres, 78 units. So we approved it. Now, I tell that story to make the point that if you're just approving everything, and if you're just doing purely what the developers want, that's how you wind up with a giant mess. You have to have a mayor and city council push back and represent the residents who actually elected them.
So your role is not a rubber stamp. Your role is try to preserve the character and nature and integrity of the city and listen to residents, not just people who want to build things here.
Right. We want to give landowners their property rights, but there's also zoning that overlays that, and we want to protect the residents who lived here so they can maintain their quality of life.
And speaking about that, I see Orem City now has a brand new city center. Mm-hmm. And I've heard competing theories about that. Again, back to that illegal push-pull I was talking about earlier. That was the other piece on it, was somehow you're claiming credit for that city center, and other people are saying that actually you don't deserve any credit for it. Tell us how that city center came about and just how much taxpayer money was used in it.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, that whole thing, you're talking about an article that a former mayor wrote where he was thinking that we were taking too much credit and he should be getting the credit. To me, that's just silly, petty, stupid stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But we had gotten things from, that person wanting a plaque to himself on the outside of the building, with other people. And I could go on and on, but I think it's completely petty. The bottom line was when I got into office, they'd had conversations about that city building for the previous 10 years. And the previous mayor, he was a proponent of it, but he was never able to get it done. He talked about it, but he couldn't get it done. He couldn't get the votes. And so, and you can come to your own conclusions why he couldn't get the votes. I mean, nothing really changed, but whether it was confidence in the city council or whatever it was, he couldn't get the votes to make it happen. And if you want any more information, go back and read that article that Dave Spencer wrote, where he essentially pushed back the other way. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that was another thing in one of our city council meetings, early city council meetings. I'd gone through the project. I looked at all the numbers. I looked at the revenue that we had coming in. I looked at revenue we had saved. And then I pitched to city council, let's do this. And I got a 7-0 approval of it.
And how much taxpayer money was used on that new building?
Well, there's taxpayer money used, but it's taxpayer money that was from savings, mm-hmm. right, that had been set aside by managing the budget efficiently. So there was that, and then we were able to get some grant money. If I remember right, there's about $9 million in total in grant money that we got. The total project was $37 million, mm-hmm. but we were able to piece different things together with some savings from previous administrations, and then get that up. The total cost was $37 million.
So no bonding or very little bonding?
There was no bonding.
No
there
bonding.
Was no taxes.
So you paid cash.
Yep.
And so no interest from taxpayers, just the cost of the building.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that is pretty much unheard of. Mm-hmm. I mean, you show me another city that has a city building with no taxes, no debt.
I can't think of one off the top of my head. Certainly not Salt Lake.
Right.
Well, and then obviously one of the things that we love about Orem is we've got some beautiful parks. My kids love going to Sarah Park. Center Street with the All Access Park is fantastic. When we have my grandkids there, they love going there. What's your stance on parks, and what have you done to, preserve that, make them better, and what do you see going forward?
Yeah, right now we've got about roughly 23 parks, if I remember right, and our parks are amazing. That Hillcrest Park is one that we got through on my administration.
And that's in place of the school that was sitting there, and rather than give it to developers, you turned it into a park.
Right, and there was an argument, there was a conversation of throwing more density there, but ultimately that became a park, and it's an awesome park. It's won all kinds of awards, and that was with no new taxes, no debt either. That park, and as far as additionally, we had when Alpine kept shutting our schools down, we had an issue where if Alpine's shutting our schools down, we need to protect the school and the park next to it, because that was laid out originally in our master plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if Alpine's going to shut down the school, sell the land potentially, and potentially put density there, that was a problem. So we passed a resolution, one of the first in Utah, where if it's a park or a school, it has to stay a park or a school.
Awesome. Well, recently, I think it was either this session or the last session, the state of Utah passed a law banning pride flags in public buildings. Now, I don't think that's been a problem in Orem, but I got to think that there is a certain contingent of people who want to push that kind of, let's call it propaganda, on city property. Have you had any experience with anything like that at all?
Yeah, we've had some. And it's a big thing out there, right? I mean, you can call it the woke agenda. I mean, that woke agenda is trying to infiltrate everywhere. And when I ran, I mean, I decided I wanted to help Orem define its values and who we really are, who I believe the majority of our community are. And so with that in mind, I really took a God, family, country as being my key focus. Mm-hmm. And with that, we took Family City USA, which Orem's been called, off and on, a nickname for years, and we actually institutionalized it. We made it so it is our motto. And with that, it's on our city buildings, it's on our parks, it's on our city vehicles, it's on our stationery. We are Family City USA, and we identify as family values. The other part that we did that I think you'd find interesting is I always thought, how come we don't really identify in God we trust? And that's the national motto. But I think as a city, we should have that also. And so I did some research on it. It turned out there wasn't a single city in Utah except for Roosevelt who had adopted that motto about 8 or 9 years ago. Mm-hmm. Is either Roosevelt or Duchesne. And so I pitched the city council, let's do this with Orem. Let's put this in our city council chambers. Let's make this part of our motto too. And so, and our attorneys were concerned about it, obviously, in this world that we live in. But we went ahead and passed it, and we got pushback, and we got some hate mail. But at the end of the day, we are Family City USA, and we have In God We Trust. And so you've got God, family, and then as far as country, we do things all over the city to try and promote patriotism in the country. But the final thing, not the final, but another thing is the new City Hall, we're going to build a Gold Star monument and a Gold Star memorial to servicemen who have passed away in battle. And so that'll be a really significant thing. There'll be a park in the middle of all of our city buildings that will have that.
Well, that's wonderful. And what a tribute to those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. It's easier for us to sit back here in really relative comfort, but at the end of the day, the reason we can is because there are people willing to go out and put their life on the line to keep us safe and to keep us free. So right. I applaud you for doing that. I think that's a great move.
Yeah. No, I as far as God, family, country, I just think if you don't put a stake in the ground and say, this is who we are, these are our foundational values and beliefs, if you don't put a stake in the ground, then other things will push you out. And so that's why I've had such a focus on that my first term.
Well, again, it's like one of my favorite presidents, Ronald Reagan, said was, "We're not one nation under God; we're just one nation gone under." So,
Right.
I agree with that. We need to remember where we came from and why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you. Another issue that we've talked about, again, we talked a little bit about taxes, but are there other areas? I mean, obviously, if you're going to be careful about raising taxes, you're going to looking for ways to save money without, undercutting the way the city's run. Are there other areas in Orem where you've been able to save money and again, approach that standard of not having to raise taxes or making that your last option?
Yeah. Yeah, and some of these reasons are why we received that award from the Chamber, this Business of the Month award. But so we've got all kinds of things we're doing in the city. So we changed city management fairly significantly after I was elected, or within that first year. And along with doing that, we actually did a management, we hired a management consulting group to do an overall Orem City management consulting evaluation, where they went into every single department, every single area, and looked at how it was being run and made suggestions on how we could optimize it and make it better. So I don't know another city that's ever done that, but we did that in Orem, and we got a lot of good data, and we implemented a lot of that data, which saved us a lot of money and made our departments more effective. We also did a study. We wanted to know if our employees were happy. And so we did a study that was a poll that they could do, and nobody could see who answered which way. And overwhelmingly, all of our employees were very, very positive about the direction of Orem, the leadership of Orem, and their role in it. Because we saw a lot of people who, when we rearranged things, we saw a lot of our younger people who were able to rise up and really excel and use their talents to their full potential. So, those two studies were a big deal. We actually formed another thing that I don't think anyone's got. It's a strategy and innovation team. And that strategy and innovation team, their role is to gather input from all the different departments and constantly to be doing research on how to optimize things. And through that group, in that first year that we put them in place, we saved $1.1 million taxpayer money, just by running that. We also hired, as part of that team, we hired a full-time grant writer. And so that grant writer has brought in millions of dollars into Orem City, which is another way that we're able to keep taxes flat. We've done, we put together a transparency portal that tells you everything you can ever imagine about Orem as far as our finances, voting records. There was just so much information that was just somebody's opinion that I wanted absolute data. And so this transparency portal is unreal. We put together a contact app. People would complain because they'd reach out to the city about, I think you could do this better on this road, or I think you need to fix this here. And they'd call in the city, and it would go into the vapor, was the complaint. And so we put together this contact process where they can go on the city website, they can make any recommendation they want, and that recommendation will go to the person over that department. That person over the department is responsible to give it to somebody on his department, but then also it has to be followed back, and then that person has to be answered. So there's a complete accountability on requests from residents and then being answered back. So all these things have just made, I've talked to different people in the city, some that have been there as long as 30 years, and they say that from their perspective, the city is in the best place it's been in 30 years.
Wow. That's amazing. And so people can go on the website, they can look for just about anything they want and know exactly what Orem's budget is and where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm sure the oppositions look through that and find all kinds of waste and fraud and abuse, haven't they?
They actually haven't.
But they seem to find frivolous lawsuits and bring that up instead.
No, that's the most important thing to Orem residents.
Right. There you go. All right. Well, just a couple rapid-fire questions as we get close to wrapping up here. What's something that nobody knows about you that they maybe ought to?
I don't know if it matters or not. As a kid, I grew up in 12 different places by the time I was 12. That's significant. My dad was in the military.
Oh,
so
okay. I would have guessed military by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So some people would say I'm very unbalanced psychologically because I lived in all these different places. Other people would say I could adapt to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And then I'm a serious hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken a world record mountain goat and a world record elk. I've spent
Wow.
probably over 1,000 nights in the backcountry. Most people wouldn't know that.
Impressive. Now, how long have you lived in Orem?
35 years.
35 years.
Mhm.
In the same house?
Same house. That's how I wound up running for mayor. Was I had tried to. I like change, and so I had pitched my wife on moving. About every 10 years. Every 10 years she said no. So every 10 years we'd remodel our house. And this last time, we were there 33 years or 32 years, and that's when I came to her and I said, okay. And this is after they'd thrown up all the high density and the traffic was becoming a mess. I said, okay, are we going to die in this house? And she said, yeah, we're going to die in this house. So I just said, if we're dying in this house, I'm going to run for mayor and I'm going to fix this stuff.
Sounds like you're a good and loyal husband there. All right. And, of course, the most emotional question for me, what's your favorite band?
Oh. And it's not really band. I'm if I said ones I like the best, I'm kind of old school, so it'd be I like Michael Jackson music.
Michael Jackson.
I like Whitney Houston. I like Celine Dion.
So you're more of a pop kind of guy, or at least that's where you're going right now. Is more your pop music.
Yeah, I mean back in the day, I liked Boston and.
Okay, so you are redeemable then. You like Boston. That means there's something good about
I like
you.
REO Speedwagon.
Okay, there you go. Okay, all right. I was worried about you.
Led
for a minute.
Zeppelin.
I feel better. Well, Led Zeppelin. Okay, all right. Yeah.
Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's taste. All right. One more rapid fire question. What are some things that people don't know about you?
Yeah, as far as one is I was a professional magician, and I did it for 4 years, and we did over 200 shows all across the western United States, Vegas, Reno, Tahoe, and then also colleges mostly.
Wow. Okay. All right. I've also understood that you're actually an author. Have you written a book?
Yeah, I did, and I just did it a couple years ago. Actually, it's fairly new. It's called Hunting for True Wealth, and this would be of interest for anybody who wants to really get to know me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to do a full analysis before you vote, this would be the full story. Hunting for True Wealth. It's about a dozen extreme hunting adventures that I've been on, from Alaska, Africa, British Columbia, all over the place, where you're out doing very serious hunting. So there's a dozen stories in there, and then it's called Hunting for True Wealth. So my business is investments. I own Paragon Wealth Management.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm incorporating how we manage money and how we build wealth. And then I think more important than wealth is true wealth, which is ultimate happiness. And so I lay out a lot of principles in that book for how to build true wealth or happiness.
Sounds like it might be a worthwhile read. Thank you. Well, last question. And first of all, I want to thank you for taking some time with me. I hope voters can have the opportunity to get to know you better and make informed decisions. But that brings us to the money question, if you will. In a couple weeks, people are going to be getting their ballots. They're going to see your name and the name of somebody that, she's been a friend. I know her well. But what is it that you would want to say to voters to say, here's why you got to check the Dave Young box?
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage voters to do some research and seriously research the candidates. The worst thing for a voter is to be an uninformed voter, because at that point you're just doing what your friends are telling you. And so I'd encourage people to learn about myself, to learn about my opponent, and then make that decision. As far as the reason I'm running is I ran initially to fix a number of things in Orem, and I believe we've accomplished most of those. We didn't get into a lot of it, but there's a list of over 33 pretty significant changes that we've made to Orem for the better in the last 4 years. And so, like I said, I wasn't planning on running, but when I started to see what was developing as far as a group who was essentially going out and finding candidates, funding candidates, and endorsing candidates, and bringing them to try and control the mayor and city council's race, when I saw that happening, I thought that would be very, very bad for Orem. It would take us back to the past. It would bring back the density, all the things that we've been successful in stopping, they're trying to bring back. And so I'm basically taking one for the team, and I'm going to do my part if I get elected to keep us on the same path that we've been on the last 4 years.
So you're not running for the huge paycheck.
No, this is very costly for me to be involved with this.
Right. Well, it's like people say when they ask me how much did you get paid in the legislature, and I says, well, I lost money.
Right.
And I'm assuming that you're probably taking time away from your business, but this is a labor of love for you.
It's 100% service. This is, yeah, it's 100% service.
I appreciate that. Now, obviously, you want your voters to get in touch with you. What's the best way to reach out if they got a question for you?
Yeah, so we've got a website. It's Dave for Orem.
Okay.
Just Dave for Orem.
.org or .com?
.com.
.com.
And
Okay.
so you can go on there and you can request signs, you can ask questions, you can make donations.
Mhm.
You can go into a lot more detail and learn about, these accomplishments that I'm talking about, that sort of thing.
That's
So,
got your 33 points on it on that
Yeah.
website.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Well, everybody, DaveForHorem.com, and look forward to getting your ballot. And thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Brad.